There you go.
That should record.
There we go. Right, thank you. Can I welcome everybody to this afternoon's meeting? As a way of introduction, we have our four councillors here, plus Jill Darbyshire, Anthony Jenkins, Dr. Mark Ratter, and Morven Fraser from the external audit. So can I welcome everyone here, and can I ask if there's any apologies for absence as yet?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chairman, I declare an interest in item 6 and we'll have to leave the meeting at that item.
Thank you very much. If that's the case, could we have an agreement that we take item 7 before item 6, and that will let Barbara be here for item 7 and she can leave for item 6. Can we agree on that, please?
Yes.
I don't hear any voices of dissent, so we'll move on to the chair's report. Can I initially confirm that Louisa Yule, who would normally have been here, is the new member for the external audit manager for the East Renfrewshire Integration Joint Board, and has also been appointed to the new external audit manager for the council. The committee looks forward to working with her during her time in that position. Secondly, as mentioned at our meeting in February and in November, we received detailed feedback on the issues raised within COVID Guide to Audit and Risk Committees, published by Audit Scotland. It was agreed then that the clerk would liaise with us around now, as she has done, to ascertain whether there are any specific issues we wished to seek further feedback and focus on now by exception. I'd like to seek confirmation on the feedback we received in November and changes to internal controls required due to COVID-19 remain current, and that is still the case. Taking account of this and of course other information we have access to, such as the report on risk and the agenda today, risk on the agenda today, which refers to COVID, reports that we receive regularly at internal audit work, and reports that we see in budget issues, such as considered by the full council recently, no issues have been identified as yet by any of us, and we feel that do we feel the need to be followed up in a further stage? And I have lost the rest of my chair's report. No, I haven't. Moving forward, it always remains an option for us to seek further updates on specific issues, and if you wish to pursue any at any point, please let either myself or the clerk know. It might be useful for us to review the position later this year, in any case, perhaps late summer, to pick up on any issues that may be raised from the year and accounts process, or from the transition from the new normal, whatever that may be, working arrangements to which should be introduced by then. Finally, you will recall that when we completed the report on the income generation and commercialisation, one of the recommendations made and accepted concerned arranging a meeting between myself and the chair of the Performance and Audit Committee of the Integration Joint Board. I can confirm that that meeting took place on Monday. The issues discussed were wide-ranging, including why and how we pursued our work in income generation and commercialisation, the outcome and related recommendations, and we did, I think Linda will agree, we did touch on quite a few subjects that day. The challenges facing the IJB in the delivery of services, commercial and ethical issues in relation to provision of services, and the changes in future that could stem from the review of adult social care. We agreed that having the representation on this committee and the IJB and related bodies continued to be useful, and a further discussion between us on any issue in the future would be useful, as those on Monday were, that could be arranged. Can we move on to today? And we can also welcome John Burke, who is with us and who is the replacement for Ron Leach and the other officers that were introduced. And since we have now an extra member of the committee, good afternoon, Annette. Jill Darbyshire, Mark Ratter and Morven Fraser from the External Audit and Anthony Jenkins are with us today. Any questions on that one? I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but do you have any questions on it?
No.
Nothing. Okay, we'll move on to the risk register. Item 4, risk register and risk management. And Jill will be speaking to this one.
Thank you very much. Good
Okay,
afternoon.
Jill.
Good afternoon, thank you. The report in front of you provides the latest biannual update of the Council Strategic Risk Register and a summary of risk management progress. The previous update of the Strategic Risk Register was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 24th of September 2020. The Strategic Risk Register Appendix 1 in front of you sets out the key strategic risks to be considered by the Council and details the action that management has put in place to manage these. Since the Strategic Risk Register was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee in September, a thorough review of all risks in the register has been undertaken. Currently, 13 risks remain as high, 3 risks were rescored from high to medium, 10 were added to the register, no risks have been removed from the Strategic Risk Register in front of you, and 11 risks retained the same score as before, but the risk descriptions have been amended to clarify the position or provide further clarity. Within the report, a risk tolerance map is included and the risks set out by outcome. The corporate management team continue to discuss and review the Strategic Risk Register on a regular basis, and it remains a standing item on the CMT agenda. The Strategic Risk Register is reported every 6 months to Audit and Scrutiny Committee and annually to Cabinet. I can only apologise, but an error has been identified in relation to risk 6.9. This is the one relating to Brexit. In the document in front of you, the rescored risk after mitigations is currently shown as a total of 12. This is an error, and following mitigation, the score should read a likelihood score of 2 and an impact score of 3, resulting in a rescore risk of 6. I can only apologise for this. In summary, as part of the review of the Strategic Risk Register, 10 new risks were added, 9 risk descriptors were amended to reflect the current position. There are now 42 risks in the register, of which 18 are classified as high. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee is asked to consider and note the development of the Council Strategic Risk Register, noting that this is considered a live document and will be updated and amended by the corporate management team as appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jill. We are asked to note and comment on this. And does anyone have any comments on it?
No.
No hands up. No question. Oh, there's Jim.
Thank you, Stuart. I couldn't find the bit on Scottish independence, given that the SNP, who are in administration currently in Holyrood, and I know we have an election due, but they are seeking a majority. If they get it, and they get their referendum, assuming the UK government was to acquiesce, which it says it won't. If they did, given that, before COVID we had an 11% deficit, this year is estimated to be a 27% deficit. The impact on the finances of this council would be quite catastrophic. And I noticed a lot of Brexity stuff in there, where trade is much reduced, where our financial services are not dependent upon Europe, but we are global players, and a significant amount of our banking system would have to relocate to England. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that would see capital flight, talent flight, massive reduction well, there would be no subsidy from the rest of the UK. So why is that not in the risk register? Can I ask that question, please?
Don't know whether Jill or Margaret wants to answer that one. It was actually one of these questions I asked at the pre-meeting the other day, but there's Margaret's going to answer it. Margaret?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, this is something that has come up before. I think we've been asked this question before, maybe not in Audit and Scrutiny, but perhaps at Council or Cabinet. We consider risks that we think are likely to crystallise, and at the moment there is not anything that is perceived as a direct threat. Certainly when we were looking at the economic and financial outlook for the council at the end of February in the long-term financial planning report. At this stage, there's nothing been flagged up either from our economic, treasury or banking contacts here on this one. And I think, as Councillor Swift said, it's probably because people will be reassessing the situation after the May Holyrood elections. And if at that point they start to flag up that they think there could be consequences, then obviously it's something that we would have to build in if we thought it was going to impact directly on the council.
Thanks, Margaret. As Jill said, though, this is a live document and this will be amended as time goes on. Annette.
I was just to come in really quickly. Councillor Swift brought this up. I think Margaret's entirely right. This question was asked at the last council meeting, if recollection serves, and I'm pretty sure it was answered. That was all.
Can I say that it wasn't the last council meeting? It was probably a year ago at the audit meeting, because it can't be the last council meeting because Jim Swift wasn't at the last council meetings.
Oh. Yes, it was.
The last 2 or 3 you haven't. Well, sorry, the last one's in January, whatever it was.
It was just the meeting
yes,
we just had.
I raised it 6 months ago, I think.
It was raised at the council meeting on the 25th of February, but not under a strategic risk register item. I believe it was raised under the financial planning long-term revenue item. I think that's where it came up from. But I can just reiterate what Councillor Miller said, that it's updated on a rolling basis, so we don't need to wait 6 months to update this. If we think any risk at all has materially changed or a new risk has emerged, then we can amend it. As I say, it's something that's on the agenda every single week at the corporate management team.
Thank you, Mrs. McCrossan. It's much appreciated. I have to say, I agree. I can't see any independence referendum ever being likely to happen. So, yeah.
Well, let's move on from politics now. This is we try to refrain from politics in this committee. Annette.
I think you've covered my point, Stuart. I try really hard to stay away from trying to make big, cheap political points. I would ask that Councillor Swift could perhaps refrain from doing the same. I take this committee quite seriously.
Well, actually, this committee, I would suggest, is quite a serious committee, and that was actually a very valid point. It wasn't really so much political. I have already asked it at the pre-meeting, and I knew the answer. But it is a valid point. It's not political at the moment, but we don't need to make it political. Can we now move on, please? I don't see any further hands up. Can we move on to item number 7? Is it 7? It's the one in Brexit, and I must admit.
5, would you
item
please?
5.
5.
Yeah. So on that, Anthony's going to be there. I must admit, I had quite a chuckle at seeing Anthony's facial expressions when that last question was being asked. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. The report under item 5 is essentially just an update from November 2020 when I was last at committee, taking cognizance, obviously, of the fact that a trade agreement was reached on the 24th of December and entered into on the 1st of January this year. I don't have too much to add to the report, other than possibly a bit more detail in relation to paragraph 9. Where I discussed budgetary and service impacts potentially. This had primarily been a general point in relation to goods being purchased from the EU and indeed potentially Northern Ireland being subject to increased costs that could then impact, or delays that could then impact on services. I think since then, and indeed last week, the UK government had announced that import controls would be relaxed for a further 6 months. So April's less of a concern of this than it previously been. But I suppose examples of goods that we import may well be fresh foods for school meals or in care homes, or if there's any kind of reliance on things like fresh foodstuffs, but other councils have flagged concerns in relation to vehicle parts or components, and some councils in recent COSLA calls have flagged building materials as being a significant concern for them. This may well be due to the remote nature, but some councils have flagged either unavailability of certain wood materials or 25% price increases. As with a lot of the report and EUX in general, there's still a lot up in the air waiting to find out what will happen.
All right.
But we're also, I suppose, in a situation where we don't know, and I don't think anyone knows if any negative impacts are being felt, if that's COVID, if it's Brexit, or if it's a combination of the two. So I wouldn't go into any kind of speculation there on my own part. And then paragraphs 16 and 17, where I've discussed replacement funding, there is still a lot of guidance and information emerging from the UK government on what will replace EU funding. The intention is that the UK structural fund, I've got the wrong name there, it's EU structural funds. The intention is that UK Shared Prosperity Fund from 2022-23 financial year would come in and replace EU structural funds. For the 21-22 financial year, there is a fund called the UK Community Renewal Fund, which is aimed as being a bit of a pilot process to smoothly transition away from EU funding to UK funding. As I say, there's a lot of details emerging on that. It's quite a live issue from the UK government with new publications and detail. There is an internal council officer group later in March to explore this, as well as longer term processes applying to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So I believe in the report I mentioned that services may be impacted. It would be those who are currently receiving EU funds that might apply for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and it's largely be aware of what changes are coming and how they would meet the criteria in trying to apply. But I think that's it for myself, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Barbara's hand up.
Chairman, just a couple of points, if I could get some clarification. Anthony, what services really are we looking at under item 16 here? What would be the main problem replacing funding for service? I'm not quite sure what services we're talking about. And the other one I was looking at was the state aid. What specifically kind of thing are we dealing with? State aid, keeping to the EU rules. What do we gather for the state aid business? Okay.
So for 16, it's quite a broad thing. It's not necessarily specific council services, but a lot of the kind of areas is investment in skills, investment for local businesses, investment in communities and places, and supporting people into employment. So you can imagine, I suppose, that some council services have links to that, but it's probably primarily community groups, etc. And liaison within the council will have responsibility under the Community Renewal Fund, and it's anticipated under the Shared Prosperity Fund to take in applications and provide them to the UK government. But it really just is for the council. It's any services that are receiving that funding just now from the from the EU. And as I say, it's themes such as investing in skills, businesses, communities, and supporting people into employment. So,
do we actually have any examples in our area of that whole business?
Yeah, our economic development help people into work. I can go and get some more information and report back in more specific areas. For state aid, the reason for following the EU model just now is that the UK model is still being developed, and the kind of position from Scottish Government and COSLA was that following the existing model would be more justifiable if a business was to put a claim in. I don't know how much is paid out on state aid. I don't think it's particularly a lot, if any, from the council, but again, I can clarify that and come back.
Yeah, well, it might be helpful to us if we had some kind of localized specifics of something that has maybe been in the past or might be in the future. These paragraphs are fine, but they're very general, so it's hard to get your head around exactly what are we talking about, you know.
Thanks, Barbara. Annette.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Anthony. I write down my questions. I'm working my way through the report. I write down my questions, and what I kept seeing, and I've looked back on them, I'm looking for more clarity on dates on every single one. There's a lot of things on page 32 and 33. Again, let me see. It's the likely impact upon economic development, trading standards, and environmental health. I've said, do you anticipate any information on what these impacts will be, and when do you expect that to be in with you? And what's the other one? I worked through them. The data sharing information. Is there any details on what happens after the end of June 2021, and how will the council be affected? On the one, I think Barbara was just asking about that, about the state aid. It says this guidance is actively being updated. But again, I think I've written, when will we have more clarity on what this guidance will be? And the last one with these was the agreement for a level playing field in areas such as environmental standards, state subsidies, and labour rights. The paragraph goes on, this should mean that these areas would not weaken from their current position. And I suppose my question is, when will we have clarity on those? And I did have one final point. It was page 34, the Home Office figures. It's the settlement scheme applications, the figure of 58% in East Renfrewshire that have applied. Is that indicative of across Scotland or the UK?
Okay, so I suppose for some of the elements, I could have better articulated that the dates aren't really clear, and that's why they've been vague in this. So, for example, with state aid, it does come down to the UK government and the Department for Business, Enterprise, Industry, and I forgot what the S stands for, so apologies. But they'd indicated later this year, so it would be autumn this year, but it's still quite vague, I appreciate. For services such as trade and standards, environment, health, and economic development having increased impacts from contact from business, it has been quite low level just now. It would really have been from 1st January as the kind of changed border model came into effect. I think it may well, again, it's how long is a piece of string, I suppose, but it would be aligned to any significant changes to the border model. So we'd now be looking at July when the import controls change, and January when there's further changes to the import model. But it has been very low level engagement within East Renfrewshire. State aid, again, oh no, we've covered that, sorry. EU settlement scheme, the 58%, we are broadly similar to Inverclyde and a couple of other neighbouring authorities, but there are authorities in Scotland where there's 125% or 200%. There's a couple of authorities where there's a lot lower levels of engagement. What I would say is because it's reliant on generally broad figures, so they round up from the nearest 500 to the nearest, sorry, they round up from 500 to the nearest 1,000. So potentially East Renfrewshire could have anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 EU residents for this general survey that's carried out by National Records Scotland. We will, right up till June, be carrying out activity to try and increase uptake in that to maximise the amount of people who apply for the EU settlement scheme. That's included in the last month engaging with the Chamber of Commerce to push out information to businesses. We have had customer facing services undergo awareness training provided by COSLA. We've provided a kind of frequent asked questions sheet in case anyone does contact our customer facing services to give them advice on settlement scheme, including support from the International Office of Migration that's provided through Scottish Government and COSLA. And then we will be refreshing our own messaging through social media, council website, etc., as well as trying to get in touch with community representative groups, and I'm open to anything on that front to try and push applications. Did I miss anything else from the questions?
Yeah.
No, that was it. Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you.
Can I bring in Councillor Swift very quickly? I know he's good to go a wee while.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Do you know, 5 minutes ago, Councillor Ireland tells this committee that she takes it seriously and doesn't make political points, and then goes on to make a range of political questions, oblique points. But there we go. It's a funny old world. I would just like to help Councillor Ireland out by pointing to 30.33, finance and efficiency. There are currently no finance and efficiency implications arising from this report. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Barbara, you still want to come back?
Yeah, well, only just to say that some of the things that have been mentioned in the questions, if Anthony has any specifics that he can come up with, I mean, I'm sure he could send any of these points to Linda and she can bring us up to speed at the next meeting. I mean, I don't think we need a whole rigmarole, but just things that have been asked, if we just get an update to Linda, then she can advise us at the next meeting. I think that might be helpful. I mean, these are the kind of things that are a bit ongoing, and you never quite know with the EU what rubbish they're going to come up with next. So if you can update us on more local kind of things, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony could manage to do that, but I think from the comments we've had so far that it would be good to have an update from Anthony around August, September time. If that would be agreeable to the committee. I know Anthony's contract ends in September, so it might be better before Anthony goes. If that's agreeable, we don't have any. Yeah, okay, I see nodding heads. So thank you very much for that one. Anyway, any further questions?
No.
Nothing then. Okay, we'll move on now to item 7 for the next. I know it was a wee bit late getting in, but we decided to go for item 7 before item 6. So can we go on to item 7? And I think Linda's going to speak to this one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A copy of the Audit Scotland report and Housing Benefit Performance Audit Annual Update 2020, and that was published in December 2020, has already been circulated to members of the committee. Under the specialisation arrangements the committee has in place, the members who are leading on this review are Councillor Swift and Councillor McLean. The Head of Communities, Refugees and Change has provided comments on the 2020 National Audit Report and an update on progress within the Council's Housing Benefit Service, and these are attached to the report. You're just being asked to consider the feedback provided and if you wish to take any further action on any of the content.
Any questions to Linda on that one?
No.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, if there's no questions, then we can move back to item number 6.
Excuse me, Chairman. I'll bail out now.
You're allowed to disappear, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thankfully, we've still got 3 left, so we're still quoted.
Yes.
Right, I'll leave it up to this. This was Mark's going to speak to. Dr. Mark Ratter's going to speak to this one.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to advise the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on which recommendations from the ERCL Best Value Review are still relevant, and also to share with you the associated action plan. You'll remember that the Best Value Review was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee back in June 2020, and it's in Appendix 1 just for ease of reference. But you'll recall that the review was undertaken prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the restrictions that have resulted from that had and continue to impact the trust massively, with most employees still furloughed, buildings closed, their activities suspended. So paragraph 6 sets out the actions from that committee meeting, and you'll remember that it was recommended and agreed that the Director of Education with the Chief Exec of the Trust review the recommendations in light of the pandemic and then advise you which are still relevant at a future meeting. So paragraph 8 of the report highlights some of the key strengths of the Best Value Review, but it also set out 23 recommendations, and they're on page 79 of the papers if you want to have a quick look at those. So in partnership with the Chief Exec, we've reviewed the recommendations and they fall into a sort of number of groups. 9 of the recommendations were ones that didn't require further action. So they were ones that were for noting or acknowledging, so that they've not been taken forward. 1 is considered overtaken, and that was recommendation 10. And recommendation 17 is considered annually through the NGA performance report, which is taken to Cabinet. So a further 12 are still considered to be relevant. And you'll recall that previously there was a Solace in Business report and an associated action plan, which was approved by the Trust's board in June 2018 and is overseen by myself, the Chief Finance Officer, and the Trust's Chief Exec. And that action plan was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee in November 2018. So rather than create an additional action plan so that they had essentially two documents that they were taking forward, we've reviewed the outstanding recommendations from the best value review and aligned them and incorporated them into the existing action plan from the finance and business review. So the new actions are shown in your papers in blue. Closed recommendations, the original Solace business and review are shown. So the format is still quite new and can be refined going forward. There were one or two of the recommendations that maybe I'll just highlight and give a little bit more additional detail. So on page 87 of your papers, there was a recommendation from the best value review to invite the Trust to market the vacant space at the Foundry in Barhead. And you'll see from the papers that it originally, or at the moment, has an NA in terms of the timescale. Now that was mainly due to the fact that the Foundry is at the moment taken up with the vaccinations, and so until the Foundry is fully operational, that was the timescales that had been put down. However, I suppose with the announcement and the phased return of office staff from the end of June on Tuesday with the First Minister's announcement, we would probably propose a date of March 22 to have that marketed and taken forward. The recommendation sitting underneath that was one about supporting further the development of improved financial planning for the Trust. And I suppose maybe an update around that one is that, again, that originally had an NA for the timescale as the Trust produces a rolling 3-year budget as part of their last planning cycle. But with greater sort of collaboration with ERC at the moment, this was the year that they had certainly worked much more closely with Margaret's team around the development of the service fee. So we are suggesting that that would be a November 2021 date, which would be part of the next planning cycle for 22-23 onwards. And the final one, that probably just to give you a little bit more detail, the last recommendation in blue, recommendation 15 at the end of the paper, which was around the revised procedures for complaints. Work is being undertaken on that. So I would suggest the date of June 21 for that one has been agreed between the Trust and the Council. So hopefully they give some helpful updates, Chair. The committee is asked to consider and comment on the Finance and Business Review and Best Value Review Action Plan, which is not a very catchy title, I accept.
I don't think catchiness is the word for this anyway, but it's quite a comprehensive review. Do we have any questions, either Annette or Charlie, who's the only ones that are left?
No,
Annette?
Thank you, Chair. It wasn't really a question. It was actually just to say a huge thank you to everyone for this paper here. It's really very positive. There's a lot of good things there. There's a lot of good work that's been done. There was a paper brought to Council on the 25th of February, and it was the Trust business plan. And I remember being really impressed with everything the Trust has been doing just up before COVID hit us. And it's just, I wanted to say thank you, because it's very obvious that there's still a lot of work being done.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the person that wrote the report was Charlie Leloup, and he's now gone almost a year now. It's not just COVID that has been going about for a year, but Charlie just, I noticed his last interview was on the 2nd of March, which just sneaked in before COVID. But he obviously went through the education and the Trust and all the rest of it, and we thank Mark for that report. Any further questions? I see your hand still up, Annette. No, that's it.
No, no, that's fine.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we will draw this meeting to a close, and I kind of thank those that are left. I appreciate your company for this afternoon.
Not at
I'll
all.
even
Very good.
appreciate the sunshine even more.
Good.
So
Thanks very much.
go out, enjoy the day, because according to the forecast, it's not going to last. Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you the next
You're
time.
welcome. No bother.
Thank you.
Thank you.